I'm with the Shadow Secretary of State for Wales Nia Griffith MP. Nia, a lot going on in the news, and we'll talk specifically about what's going on in around Llanelli and Carmarthenshire. We start with the main news. 40,000 PPE gowns being found to be substandard. Unemployment in the UK and Wales. We know Cambrian training are making these gowns. Isn't there a case now for looking at sort of re-establishing the manufacturing industry in Wales, albeit multi-skilled people ready and available to do these things should it crop up again?
Well, absolutely. I think there's been a real calamity with that 40,000 gowns that the UK government brought in from Turkey. But on the good news side, as a stopgap to help us at the moment with the peak that we've got, we have had a very good delivery to Cardiff Airport, 2 aircraft coming in from the Far East. And I understand not only from the First Minister, but from people here on the ground in Llanelli, that they can now see there are gowns in the store cupboard. It's not a matter of only having a day or two, it's a matter of knowing where they're coming for the next few weeks. But I know that my colleague Lee Waters is working very hard on the idea that for successive peaks, we try to source as much as possible from here in Wales. And there have been a fantastic number of offers. And I think the question is, how realistically can those be turned into manufacturing of gowns and such like for the long term? We all know what the pressures are on all the small businesses that there are and all the difficulties. And certainly both we need that industry to be there. We need the innovation we've seen from some of our manufacturers being able to change over and doing all sorts of things. We need the support for industry, and we need a clear pathway to help them, because it's not going to be a sudden switch on of the economy. It's going to be a gradual time for people actually to get going and actually start purchasing and going out and all the rest of it.
So is there still a shortage of PPE in Wales then?
Well, we seem, as I say, at the moment to be in a situation where they are all saying they feel confident they've got the supplies and they can see the supplies coming in. So I think at the moment we have turned that corner, which I'm very, very grateful for, because we all know it's been very, very tricky up till now.
We've heard that Wales has passed the peak, and there's possibly that there's a sort of staged lifting of restrictions. Do you have concerns that there could be a resurgence, and how confident are you in the scientific and medical data, given that there's been a lot of confusion around that?
Well, I think what we all know is that this is a terrible disease and that it can affect anybody of any age, no matter how fit and healthy they are. So let's be really wary. And my worry is that people throw caution to the wind. I think it's absolutely vital that if we're going to make any form of coming out of lockdown work, every single one of us has got to think about just hanging back a bit in that supermarket queue, just, leaving a bit more space for somebody in front of you on the pavement, all that sort of thing. It's got to be a constant. And I do worry that people are going to perhaps rush into, I want to do this, that and the other, and perhaps forget. It's very easy, all of us forget. We get out of the habit of something. So it's going to be a real collective effort if we're going to make it work.
Well, Germany have allowed children to go back to school today. They've been proactive in adapting. Isn't it the case that in Wales here we've been reactive and not enough is being done to find adaptive solutions to allow healthy people to resume their daily lives? Shouldn't we really be focusing now on what you're saying there, the re-education of people, the sort of gradual education of, how we maintain this, not sort of, here we go, hey-ho, restrictions are lifted, it's a free-for-all?
Well, I think what Welsh Government's made very, very clear is that we have to have proper planning. And we've been out in front saying this and calling on the UK government actually to do that proper planning. We can absolutely talk about all the things that we need to do now, but people must not think that means we're going to have end of lockdown tomorrow. The point is the planning, as you say, is what really matters. How do you operate in a school? We've talked about the children sitting apart, but think of the massive amount of shared equipment, sports equipment, science labs, computers. I mean, the schools function on the basis that many, many pupils will use many of the same items throughout the day. I mean, that's that's how we work. We don't have 700 of everything in a school of 700 pupils.
Given that the elderly are the most vulnerable, would you agree with Plaid Cymru leader Adam Price that testing in all care homes for all residents and staff should take place?
I think we've got to remember what's actually been said now by Welsh Government is that any care home which has a concern can immediately ask for staff and residents to be tested, and that's the whole of the residents and the whole of the staff. And I certainly have had some very good feedback in Hywel Dda, where the care homes have got in touch with Hywel Dda, and Hywel Dda has facilitated things. So I think things are working much better than they were, but quite clearly there are some real questions to be asked. And one of the questions that we discussed in the last Health Board video conference was potentially using some of the field hospital space in order to provide more facility and more space, because so often in a care home there's just no space to do any proper isolation.
A large number of self-employed people have fallen through the cracks for the grant funding available. Many businesses in Llanelli will be considering their futures. Are you aware of any assessment or studies which could identify and provide support so that the most at risk and unlikely to have access to those resources to find the financial help that they need to do so?
Well, we're still hearing that the ministers are working on this. We know that there were a lot of gaps when the programmes first came out. And then, to be fair to the Chancellor, he did try to plug some of those gaps, and he went to the 100% guarantee by government of the loans, which is very important for businesses. But clearly there are still gaps. And I understand Ken Skates is looking at some of those. And I know from the experience I've had of the many different businesses who don't quite fit into the categories. So yes, we do need to look at support going forward, and we need to look at support not suddenly tailing off, but being gradually withdrawn so that businesses can regain the confidence they need and perhaps take some people back part-time and gradually work up to full-time.
The three main pillars of society, really, health, employment, education, have been seriously affected, as we know, by the coronavirus. Are meetings taking place to profile what those three essential services will need in order to get back to some state of normality?
Well, absolutely. I've got a meeting today, a video conference with Jeremy Miles, who's been tasked with looking forward and looking at where we go next. And of course, on the much bigger economic picture, we've also asked Gordon Brown to come back and be involved in where we go for Wales's future, because I think we have particular challenges here, particular challenges for some of our industries, and we know that there are many underlying factors that have made it difficult for us in the past. So there's a massive amount of work to do, absolutely. Okay.
There's a centre open in Pwll, very similar to the one that was poised to open in Llwynhendy. We saw the objections from the community there about the noise and the behaviour issues and so on. Is something similar happening in Pwll? Are there issues there?
The real concern amongst residents in Pwll about a residential property which is now being used both as an office and as a facility for young people with difficulties. The point being, any type of facility like that needs to have the proper space, it needs to have the proper levels of staffing, and the proper support needs to be put in. Unfortunately, things have not gone well there. So now, in the retrospective planning application that's been put in, many of the residents will be objecting because, quite frankly, it hasn't worked out. And I think that's the point. Some of these facilities, well run in the right places, can be absolutely excellent. But what's happened there is an example of how not to do things. Dangerous road, hazard lines, parking not provided, all sorts of difficulties with the young people concerned because the staffing ratio or the management arrangements or the facilities there are not such as to provide the right sort of environment in the right sort of setting to give the young people the chance they really need.
And are they coming from out of county, the clients?
Well, this is one of the big issues because the policy of Carmarthenshire County Council is that young people of this nature should be looked after by the county. That gives you a real handle on the level of care and input that's been given. Unfortunately, when you farm out to the private sector, unless you have very good, very, very good safeguards and inspection regimes, there are always ways which perhaps the standards can slip. And what worries me is that, yes, young people are being uprooted from the communities that they've known. Maybe they can't be with their family, but many, how would you like to leave your own town? I mean, you know, that's a completely different issue from having to be, you know, taken away from your family. And I don't think that helps them. I don't think it helps the reintegration process. I don't think it's the right way to run things. And I do have huge concerns that, unfortunately, we have some appalling practice in the private sector. And who is suffering are the young people.
Nia, there's a big demand. We've seen an increase in food banks anyway, prior to the coronavirus, specifically in Llanelli, Carmarthenshire. A lot of people who would never otherwise dream of visiting a food bank were going there. Now the numbers and the need for that must have dramatically increased.
Yes, I mean, it's really sad that people who'd never wanted to ask for anything in their lives are having to turn to a food bank. You know, jobs suddenly lost, suddenly without any income coming in, not knowing what they're going to be doing about feeding the children, not really knowing their way around, if you like, the benefit system, finding it very difficult and embarrassing to ask. And yes, certainly we've seen a real surge in the numbers. And I have to say that, you know, the Tisha Food Bank has been working very hard right across Llanelli to try and sort out and help people. I mean, there are different types of people. Some people can definitely afford food, and they actually, what they want is someone to perhaps help shop, or, you know, get those things from the chemist because they're supposed to be shielding. We've also had cases where they've been self-isolating because they've got COVID in the family. And again, you know, they feel as socially responsible people, they shouldn't be going out. Quite clearly that's the case. So there are people of that nature who need that sort of help and support. And then there, as I say, there are those who sadly are on really, really difficult economic times.
So is this a sort of a collaboration between private businesses, individuals, local politicians, shops, supermarkets? Where's the money coming from? Where are the goods coming from?
Well, the County Council has been very supportive in providing initial funding and using Castle Howell, which is one of their big suppliers, to get things going. Following on from that, then there's been some grant funding, there's been some private donations, there's been a number of voluntary organisations, community groups which have said, well, better use the fund for this now. We'd rather see the money used. We can't do anything in our club at the moment, so you do this. So yes, it's coming from all sorts of places.
And people kind of get into the kind of mindset really that, okay, it's all over, restrictions are lifted, let's pull the plug. But that's not going to be the case, I guess. This is going to be the sort of tremors of this are going to be felt for months to come, aren't they?
I really do worry that not only will many of the people who've just lost their jobs struggle to find work, but that if the government ends the furlough scheme very suddenly, we could see a number of firms making further redundancies. And I think that's a real worry at the moment. And so, unfortunately, we'd love to close the food bank. We'd love to say nobody needs one, but I don't see that's going to happen for a very long time. We will need all the support and help we can give to those people that, unfortunately, through no fault of their own, find themselves literally with absolutely penniless.
Nia Griffith MP, thanks for speaking to us. Diolch yn fawr i chi gyd.